Okay, so welcome again. Still. I'll take you in about 20 minutes to rethinking our routines or our roots or our habits, I would say. So congratulations to the organizing committee for picking up the theme. The way I interpreted it, it's really about the ethics, about how we act and what frames do we use to guide our actions. And that's what I want to talk about with you. As a small starter, I'll have an exercise. You know, these psychological state exercise. So the question is, what do you see here? My son of 15 always sees a T-fighter from Star Wars. Yeah, but he sees T-fighters in Star Wars everywhere. My daughter of 13 sees a dog, but then again she wants a dog. So what do you see in it? Ben?
Legs. Legs.
Legs.
Legs.
Oh, legs.
Yeah, legs, leg.
And Violinda, what do you see?
Purple things.
Purple things. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Andreas, what do you see?
Very fragmented person.
Alright, so fragmented person, spotted purple things, legs. Now have a look at this one, please. Maybe 2 or 3 seconds. And then I repeat the question. So Sam, what do you see now?
I see the person riding a horse.
Brilliant. What about you? Yeah?
I still don't see the...
Okay, look at it carefully. Yeah? Head, legs of the horse, head of the horse. And now, head of the horse, legs, tail. Do you see it? Almost. Who sees a horse and a man on a horse? Okay, so most of you. Well, this is how our mind works in a way. This is how our thinking works in a way. Once we see a pattern, we start recognizing a pattern also when it's not completely there. And this is what I want to do with you today, to bring a new pattern of looking at a company or looking at an organization, trying to help you to recognize the man on a horse when you see the organization. Okay, here's the first step. I'll provide it to you in 3 steps. First steps, organization in the minimum. There's input, you do your core business, you generate output, and the output has a certain outcome or result in society. That practice for a beer brewery must get your attention. So, input of a brewery. Help me? Just yell. Hop, yep. Water, yeah. Yeast. Tanks, yeah. Installation, very good. Bottles. Electricity, brilliant. So that's more than barley, maybe. Yeah, so that's your input. Okay, core business of a beer brewery. Ah, brilliant, brewing beer. Output of a brewery. Beer in tanks or in bottles. Outcome of a brewery. Getting drunk, yeah, or have a nice party, or drive into a tree when you're too drunk. Okay, that's the outcome. Think you got it. So now that's the same organization, the same company, but now we're reading from top to bottom. And we're talking about the plan, do, check, act cycle, or the cycle of a company. So we start at the top. First, as it's a cycle, you can start anywhere, but today we start at the top. So you decide what's the strategy, what's the reason of starting your company, what do you want to achieve. You have a mission, you have a vision on the world. Okay, that's setting the direction of the company. All familiar? Yes, Paul. So operations then, second part. So you do you have operational procedures. You set operational procedure for for whatever you do in the company, for the finance, for sales, for marketing. You do a risk assessment. What are the risks and the opportunities for our company, right? We provide a strategy, design a strategy to reach our objectives, the mission, and then we allocate resources, people and money to do what we have to do. Yeah, that's the operational part. Then you have the production side, we already practiced that. And then at the end of the cycle, you report. Looking backwards, what did we achieve last year? Did we achieve our goals? Did we do the investment that we promised to do? As a reporting to the banks, for example. And then we provide an outlook, reporting on the future. What's our expectation for the future? What do we need? Yeah? We're all there. Now, same story here, but we elaborated a little with 2 items. Actually, there's a calendar here. So it's January to December. And the inputs are specified. And who of you knows John Elkington? No? Okay. Cannibals with Forks, that's the book he wrote in 1989 maybe. Who knows People, Planet, Profit? Yeah, so we heard about that. So he says if you want to have a proper company, you have a triple bottom line, not single bottom line, only money, but it's about caring about people, planet and profit. So I ordered the inputs of a company, here also in people, planet, profit. On the people side, there's social network capital. 6 types of capital. Social network capital, human capital, manufactured capital, natural capital, financial capital, and intellectual capital. Okay, we'll specify these for a brewery. The most complex one, social network capital for a brewery. What could that be? The network that the breweries needs to do what they do. Okay? Yeah, just shout out.
Yeah, they need people who know how to do it.
Yeah, that's actually the human capital. That's the staff of the brewery. Social network capital. Yeah, the suppliers and the customers, or indirect the bars who sell it to the customers, correct? And with that also your brand, the brand name, your brand promise, that's also social network capital. And also if you need a permit, your relation to the government to provide you the permit, to pump out water or to use electricity. Okay, that's all social network capital. So that's first type. Secondly, human capital. We already discovered that. It's the staff of the brewery. Manufactured capital of a brewery. The tanks, thank you. Maybe the cars. Yep. Natural capital of a brewery. The hop, the water, the yeast, barley. Yep. Financial capital. Financial loans, own earned capital, family capital, investments, correct, debts. And then intellectual capital of a brewery. The recipe, yeah, but it's also the way of working. This is how we do it. And this is smarter than the others do it. This is how we use less water or more energy efficient or better taste. Okay, that's your intellectual capital. Okay, which of the capitals don't you need for a brew? Yeah, we need everything, right? Okay, now we come to our routines, or roots, or habits. We have to regenerate the capital that you use. When you create value throughout the year, there's a starting balance in January, and there's an ending balance in December. Every bookkeeper makes these balances on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. Now, in order to generate or to create beer, we destroy a little water. In order to create beer, we destroy a little clean air because we have trucks driving up and down, right? So we destroy a little value and we create value. And we regenerate value. We invest money, but also we make money. So we regenerate the financial capital. And what I'm trying to make people believe is that we should regenerate all these capitals. At the end of the year, you should try to regenerate your natural capital. because you need barley this year, but also next year. So if you destroy the soil fertility, next year, less barley. If you destroy the water sources, next year, no beer. Right? So every company has to make profit. Profit is like the air we breathe for a company. But like with human life, breathing is not the sole purpose of life. We need air, but it's not the only thing we need. And breathing is not the sole purpose of life. So you have to make money, but you should not regenerate only your money, but you should regenerate all your capital. So you can spend your profit only once. You can spend your time only once. Don't only spend it on your investors, on your shareholders, to give them return on the investment so they invest in your company next year, but also regenerate your natural capital. Also invest in your intellectual capital. Also invest in your human capital. So this is the way of thinking. And if you think in this new way, or at least structured way, you have a new way of thinking and a more extensive way of making decisions. You feel the difference? So this is, Sam, I hope, your way of looking at a company and seeing a cowboy on a horse instead of just making profit. Because it was Friedman who said, the business of business is business. The purpose of companies is making profit. And I say, yeah, and spending profit on all 6 capitals. Alright? So I don't disagree, but I add something on. Okay, so onwards to sustainability. Who knows this graph? Yeah, I figured, most of you. Who understands this graph? It's from Ellen MacArthur. It's about circular economy, and how you produce things, how you start with the raw materials, how you manufacture, provide things, and then bring them back into either a mechanical cycle or in a biological cycle to reuse. Well, the problem for me with this graph is, how can I act? How does it help me to change my behavior? And I promise you we'll discuss about changing behavior. So, going back to my simple picture about circular economy or resource efficiency, then there's about at least six items that I can see that you can do to change your behavior in terms of input. You can procure other stuff, biological stuff, or reused stuff as resources, raw materials. You can share production capacities. The tanks, you can use them only for Heineken, but also share them if you don't use them in the evening, give them to Gulpener of whoever. Yeah? Then smarter production, smarter design, smarter production. I think somebody was from industrial design here in the room. Well, it's all about smarter production. Then, who's heard about production as a service? Yeah? Selling holes instead of drills. Selling comfortable sleep instead of beds. Selling clean clothes instead of washing machines. Huh? So that's things as a service. But also extension the lifetime by maintenance and returning the results, the end products. I have 4 more minutes left for the examples, right? I'll give you examples for all of these 6 items to show how rethinking can help you in becoming more sustainable and effective at the same time. So here is a small film, I believe. No. The film's not there. What it shows you is a sprayer, spraying herbicides and pesticides and insecticides. And it's in a guy in Steenwijk in the Netherlands. Agrivac produces these sprayers. They installed small cameras in front of the sprayers because many farmers spray empty land. At the early season, you plant potatoes are underground, So no potatoes to spray yet, or little potatoes to spray yet. So if you have a small camera, and the camera is then guiding opening and closing of the spraying, what do you call it, mouth? Nozzles, thank you, the nozzles, and you can do it at a velocity of 30 km per hour. Then by driving over the car, you detect whether there's weeds or not, whether to open or close the nozzles and to spray or not. And you can say, okay, but I don't like to use chemical products anyway, but if you use herbal-based spraying, it's still quite expensive, much more expensive than the machine itself. So if you have an effective machine, you only use the herbicides, or the pesticides, or insecticides that you really need. So you can reduce up to 99% of the current chemicals used by being much more effective on spraying the land. So think about not using products. You can sell the machine for a bit more money, but the investment is very effective for the farmer, because not only does he use less herbicides and pesticides, which are very expensive, he also uses less time. Because you can spend much more time with one tank. You don't have to drive up and down, but you can spray your whole field in just one go. Okay? So that's effectiveness on the first side. Then there's kaak. Who knows kaak? Ah, very good. They make metallurgical high-tech components, but also easy things like baking forms for baking bread and cakes. And they make them in 3D printers. They use the 3D printer only about 12 hours a week. So they rented out the printer to the school, University of Applied Science in the vicinity, and to other companies. So they generate income, and they generate intellectual capital by bringing in students, working with their printer, and generating new ideas on their own products. So it's using your assets and sharing your assets gives you income and other capital. Thinking about, 24/7 Taylor steel in Varsenveld. They're cutting steel elements from plate steel, and by nesting the I'm all stressed out now. The orders. By nesting the orders in 2 days instead of in 1 day, they can fit them like puzzles, and therefore they have over 10% less cutting losses just by keeping orders in 2 days instead of 1 day, so they can puzzle it out in a way that they don't have so many rest materials of new high-quality steel. So it's by smart production that you can reduce material used and reduce money spent or money losses. Nijenhuis in Doetinchem provide wastewater solutions, industrial wastewater solutions, sometimes on temporary basis for industries. When they receive the equipment in return, normally they are deprived, so they just throw them away. And one day they thought, oh, we put it in a container and then we rent it out. So nowadays, the rental base of this company is 10%. So it used to be waste, now it's profit. It's just reusing the equipment that you already produced and rented out. I guess you know all about condition-based maintenance, maintaining things that are broken by measuring it with sensors inside, in pumps, in equipments, in heating systems, whatever. So it reduces your cost, and it increases the production time, therefore makes you more efficient. And in the end, Beter Bed knew all about is when they designed box spring mattress like a Netflix description. So they call it a Boxflix. So you pay per month 10 euros, and you get the mattress, high level, high quality, But the interesting part is, because they're like Albert Heijn, they are a retailer. And normally they sell mattresses, they have no contact with the customer anymore. By having a prescription like Netflix, they have a monthly basis, so when the customer moves, they still have the contact with the customer. And after 10 years, it's they need to have a new mattress, they still have the contact, they can bring out a new mattress, but they also know which material is coming back. So the customer then becomes the storage for the production material for the new mattresses, if you design it in a way that you can reuse the mattress. That's what they did. So it's thinking in a different way and an easier way to make it more sustainable. So hope to give you some examples. I'm running out of time, but I hope with this simple method of looking at 6 capitals of a company and ways of thinking of reusing materials in this very simple model. You can see the cowboy on a horse.
Thank you, Paul, for this very interesting presentation. The next speaker, she's a professor at TPM. She's a professor on ethics and philosophy of technology. Please welcome Andrea Gammon.
So I want to keep an eye on the time. I'm just going to move my phone closer to where I can see it. Okay, so yeah, I'm using this talk as a way to bring together 2 things that I work on in my research. I work at TU Delft in the Ethics and Philosophy of Technology section, and I do work on the one hand on environmental and climate-related topics, on ethics, and I also, so that's like supposed to be half of my job, but it's a little less. And then the other part of my work is looking at and doing a lot of teaching at TU Delft around ethics and philosophy, and thinking in our section how we can do this teaching better, because it's a bunch of philosophers teaching engineering students, which is not what we necessarily trained to do when we were studying philosophy. So my talk is divided into 2 parts, where I'm identifying 2 ruts that have shown, that I think about in my work a lot. The first rut is thinking about sustainability as an individual way of thinking, and the second is thinking of sustainability in an extracurricular way. And so, apologies, I wrote this talk with thinking that it would only be TU Delft students, so it is really kind of geared towards this university's context and the context of engineering students. So I realize now that there are students from other universities, so I think actually it will be quite interesting. I don't think we should take this as a limitation, but to see how sustainability maybe is treated in other universities, maybe not technical universities specifically. But so that I'm going to talk about both of these in turn, and then maybe also they sort of come together at the end. Okay, so the first problem, and this is, the first issue that I want to say that we should break out of our rutted way of thinking is about the ways we tend to think about sustainability as a problem for individuals. So we know, and in this talk I'm going to talk about sustainability and climate change kind of like lumped together, but maybe we can think about them separately in the questions after. But we know that these problems are not problems that individuals alone can solve, but nevertheless they are very frequently presented to us as problems that, like, you as a person should do these things because you have an impact of a certain kind. Even though we know this is not a problem you can solve as an individual. In environmental philosophy, like I was saying before we kind of officially got started, this is also a problem. We think about environmental issues like climate change and like sustainability, and we do tend to use these ways of thinking from philosophy that are really geared around individuals. There's a reason for that when we think of these as problems that we need to take responsibility for. And traditionally, philosophy, when it thinks about responsibility, thinks in terms of who's responsible, and that's a person. Otherwise, we can't hold people responsible for bad things, we can't encourage better behaviors, whatever. So there's a reason that philosophy thinks in these ways. but we might find them limited. Specifically, like we were saying before, philosophy and ethics focuses on individual actions, on individual behaviors, and then also sometimes, although maybe to a lesser extent, our character traits, how we are as people, what kinds of people we are. And environmental ethics often has wanted to incentivize people to do better actions, to be better people, but these are usually conceptualized in terms of individual, framed as individual issues. So this has been problematized by other people. I'm only rehearsing some arguments against this. This is work by Christine Cuomo from 2011, so it's not even that recent. But so in thinking about the problems of individual responsibility with climate change, she identifies two big problems. The first is that individual actions are just plain insufficient. Like they're not going to add up to enough, even if we all do really good things. Ultimately, we'll need solutions at a larger scale than what individuals altogether will amount to. The second problem is a problem of disempowerment, or maybe that's what she calls it, but maybe that's not the best way of thinking about it, I think. It's kind of the problem that even if we all do good things, even if we do our best to reduce our impacts on the world, we all still live, part of the fact that, or part of what makes our actions insufficient is that they're based in systems that are outside of our individual control. So we can't elect to live in places where we don't have food flown in from all around the world, or where you need, in some places in the world, a car to get to your job, or those kinds of things. They're just not solvable at individual levels. And so she problematizes this she calls it, it's kind of a disempowerment problem. You can't actually expect people to make these kinds of choices when actually structurally they're not able to. Okay, so those are two problems that she brings up. One that I would want to add to this is that when we think about, or one of the consequences of thinking in individual terms is that we often reduces our way of thinking to ourselves as consumers. So it's often in terms of how you should consume, what kind of consumer you should be, whether, you make an effort to buy sustainable products, or you're trying to consume less. And of course this is important. I don't want to suggest that these kinds of actions don't matter. I think they do. I think they matter for a lot of good reasons, not just about the impacts that they have, but also because we can cultivate good ways of living through doing things that are good for the world. But I think that we can kind of get into a rut of emphasizing these kinds of actions and thinking about these as the way to be sustainable at the expense of other ways of thinking that are not individual based. So like the classic example, what is the classic example of this way of thinking? What's my next slide? Yeah.
Carbon footprint.
Of course, it's the carbon footprint. Everyone knows the carbon footprint, right? It's a really popular idea. And you probably all know by now that this was not created by an environmental-minded person or thinker. This is the work of BP, who is trying to, the analysis now is like they're trying to make individuals like you and me take responsibility for a problem that, of course we're part of, but in no way are we like the main culprits of this problem. So I think this is really interesting. This is from an ad from 2004. And I think, so obviously here they're introducing this idea, reduce your carbon footprint, but first find out what it is. So they're telling you, what do they say? They say, call it your mark on the world. Reducing your carbon footprint is or your carbon footprint is the way to think of the impact that you have on the world. Of course, it's an impact that you have. Is it the only mark on the world you have? This is what I'm trying to show. This is a very reductive way of thinking about individuals as consumers only, and as we have to make our impact as small as possible. Of course we do. Of course we do need to do those things, but that maybe is one very limited way of thinking about how we can have impacts as individuals. Okay, so one other problem with this, maybe this might resonate with people here as well, when you get into this kind of mindset of trying to reduce your consumption, it can become a kind of thing you can spend a lot of time thinking and worrying about, and maybe that time is not well spent. Maybe that's not the best use of your energy and attention if ultimately these aren't problems that we can solve as individuals. So one person who writes really nicely about this is Leah Stokes, and she's an energy expert in the US. Is there a question?
Could you just put your microphone a little bit closer?
Sorry, I'm very bad at this.
Perfect.
It sounds so loud.
It's okay, it's great.
Okay. And she writes about exactly this problem and her sort of personal overcoming perhaps of this impetus to reduce your impact as much as possible. And so she writes that, this goes back to the point from Cuomo as well. No one can unilaterally choose to live in a low carbon economy. The goal is not self-purification, but structural change. Changing the system, not perfecting our own lives is the point. And I think that this is what I'm trying to get towards. It's not about you individually consuming as little as you can, scaling yourself down as much as possible in your consumption, or doing virtuous consumption. Those things are maybe important, but maybe also, and this is what she goes on to say in this essay, it's about kind of spiraling out and finding ways or creating ways where you, in the groups that you work in and the people who you work with and live with, can make your impact greater through what you do together, rather than just reducing yourself down to, yeah. So this is the first rut that I want to kind of thematize. Do I have 20 minutes?
Yeah.
Okay. So good, so I'm kind of on time. So instead I think we should focus, and I'm also saying to climate ethicists, or not climate ethicists, to environmental ethicists, to focus also on the impacts of people in collectives, in groups, rather than thinking of only individual, virtuous, low consumptive people. I think we have a lot more that we can do together that breaks out of that way of thinking. One particular group you might think of yourself as being part of are students, or as engineers, in the case of TU Delft students. So that's kind of the connection to the second rut. So the second rut is my observation in teaching at TU Delft, and especially in teaching courses that are dealing with ethical and social issues. I teach an environmental ethics course that is an elective, that no one in the university is required to take this course. Some students do choose to take it, but it's only out of their own interest. It's because they have already a desire to study these things and know more about them that they take this course. And that's what I'm talking about as extracurricular. Now, I recognize, and this is to Delft's tremendous credit, each month there are new courses, new topics related to sustainability and climate change. And one thing I want to highlight here is the work that the GreenTU is doing also on education, to try to bring more education on sustainability into the core of teaching at TU Delft. So it's not just this extracurricular thing that the people who care about this do in their spare time. Also, where I work at TPM, and the green team at TPM also highlights the work that students have done by writing about sustainability-related topics in their thesis. But and this is tremendous, it's great, but it's so rare. There are still so few students, even in a department like mine, not in a department like mine, in a faculty like mine, who make sustainability part of the things that they're studying intrinsically, in their master's thesis. And I think this is just strange. So on the one hand, you see all of these new, I think that this is changing over time. Of course, there's more interest, there are more opportunities, this will improve. But one thing I think needs to happen more is that this becomes part of kind of the central way of thinking, rather than something we get to do in our spare time. Another thing to add to this is it's not just the topics of sustainability, but how we think about them. So we can think about sustainability from an industrial perspective, from technical perspectives. My interest is in sustainability as an ethical or social or philosophical or decolonial approach. These are things that are even further away from what we might teach in class. These are things that are completely, I mean, Studium Panorama does a tremendous job of programming these kinds of topics, but it's all outside of what we teach. It's all extra. And this feels weird, or it feels like we're moving in the right direction, but we still need to bring these topics into how we think as people who teach engineers and as also future engineers. So one thing to connect with research that's already happened in people like me who study engineering education, this woman, Erin Seck, works in the United States, and she has this really interesting research that she did in the 2000s, 2010s, I guess, where she's a sociologist, and she looked at engineering students in 4 universities in the United States and surveyed them at the beginning of their beginning of their bachelor's degrees, their undergraduate engineering students, and then at the end. And what she found was that actually students over this time ranked welfare beliefs and the importance of them as lower at the end of their bachelor degree. So they come into the differences are not enormous, that's true, but they come in with thinking that these kinds of sort of social and ethical consequential ways of thinking they think of them as more important when they've started than they do by the end of their bachelor degree. And so she talks about this, so her interpretation of this is that in engineering education, there is a culture of disengagement where students are taught to think of engineering as the hard technical things and the kind of welfare issues, things where climate change and sustainability would fall into, these social and ethical things. These are like what engineers kind of leave to the people like me, the social scientists or the ethicists, and they're not sort of like the hardcore engineering center. And so I think we have a lot of work to do at TU Delft, well, not just in TU Delft, this is not at TU Delft, but to make these kinds of issues much more central to how we think about what engineering is and how we prepare engineers to be engineers, to work at companies like yours, to do, all of the things that we know that we need to do in the next decades to address climate change and to address sustainability. So that's how I see these as kind of coming together. It's not, I would also say, quickly, it's not only engineers, right? I mean, this is not a room full of engineering students, but Seck's work is specifically on how engineering culture kind of excludes specifically these social and ethical dimensions. And I think that there's room for bringing them, it's necessary to bring them into the heart of what engineering is. Okay, I think I'm out of time.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Everything you just said is very specific to GreenTU. It's right in our core. And I want to introduce my dear friends of Biosphere Solar. They are creating a circular solar panel and they are trying to disrupt the solar industry. So please give an applause for Judit, the community builder, and Siemen, the co-founder.
Yes.
Yes.
Hi everyone, welcome. Who of you has heard of us before? Can I see a show of hands? Preaching to the choir here. Hi, I'm Sai.
I'm Judit.
And before we go into what we do as a startup, we want to take you through a little exercise of the imagination. Little peek. Okay, I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to imagine the future. I want you to imagine walking out of your house 30 years from now, 2052. And in that future, look around. What do you see? What do the buildings look like? What do the people look like? What are they wearing? What do the cars look like? Are there even still cars? right, as fun as this is, you may open your eyes and come back to the world of today. And now I'm very curious. Did you imagine something like the slide I showed you very briefly? Did you imagine catastrophic climate change destroying our systems and our life as we know it? Or did you imagine a better future? A future where we managed to overcome the challenges of the Anthropocene and started living in symbiosis with the biosphere rather than a parasite to it? Can I see a raise of hands? Who imagined a future like this? All right, optimistic, optimistic. And who imagined more something like this? Also some people. Who imagined something else or something in between? Huh. Can I hear from you? What did you imagine? Very brief.
Okay. I imagined, something not quite as futuristic, I guess. I don't know how else to say it. There's a better word, but as the image to the right, to the right, but something where, like, I could walk out of my house and I could never have to drive. It's kind of, never really have to drive, but where sort of, I don't know, the buildings didn't look that much different, maybe use a lot more like repurposed materials, and where there was a good amount of greenery outside, still like could access some form of nature. Yeah.
Great.
Thanks. It sounds still kind of positive, I guess. But we're not there yet. So I'd like to invite you to go to menti.com and type in the number, not sure if you can read it. And I'd like to ask you to fill in what you think we need to get to the future, the positive future, because we're not there yet. So what do we need? What elements will we for sure see that they're in there?
Oh, there we are.
Right in the middle, circular solar panels, very nice.
I was a little afraid we wouldn't have a sustainable future, but it's coming, it's coming.
Carbon capture, worm farms, train network, future reactor, green food, very much food. Nice. Where it's coming in.
No Bitcoin. Do we still have cryptocurrency or just none at all? No, okay.
No Bitcoin. Yeah. Education, also very important. Alternative transport. I think one thing that's quite remarkable is that we do not see fossil fuels in there, right? But for like robots or recharge stations, just saying some words, we do need energy.
So, yeah, that was very interesting. And like Judit said, energy is a very, very foundational infrastructure to our society, and it will always be. So I did something interesting. I took some data from electricity use until today, and then I plonked a study about renewable energy onto it and created this graph. So here you can see our electricity generation until today, and then you can see this amazing study by Breyer et al. Who researched all over the world what renewable energy sources could we apply to get to a fully sustainable energy system. And you can see electricity use is growing, which also is because there's a lot of other energy use, which is not electricity use, which we are turning into electricity use, so electrifying. And obviously, you can see that the biggest one is solar. And that's not a surprise, because solar is this amazing technology that doesn't require a lot of capital, still some capital, and everybody can apply it in their house without the need to build a massive and super polluting grid. So now we have this technology that can, that can electrify houses and communities worldwide. So great, but there is some issues. First of all, the aesthetics. I mean, some people argue that it's not pretty. Of course, it's in the eye of the beholder, but I do think we can come a long way into increasing social acceptance of the way solar looks. But there's much more important issues. The recycling is very, very difficult. That's because solar panels are completely glued together. And so here you can see solar panels going into the shredder in a recycling company in Germany. And that means that all of these valuable materials which are in solar panels are lost because the resulting shreds are also polluted with a lot of glue, and so it's impossible to really separate those materials and use them for new solar panels. I should say very difficult. It's not impossible, but you will always have some residues and carbon pollution. Also, in the rest of the world where recycling is not really mandated or economical, in Europe it's mandated, in the rest of the world it's not. The toxic and valuable materials just end up in the environment, and mostly solar panels are landfilled at the end of life. And then there is the upstream supply chain, which is scarred by forced labor and a lot of coal use. Still, solar panels are much more sustainable than using coal for electricity. LCA life cycle emissions of about 20 times less, but we can still come a long way in making that even lower.
So now, when we now look at this picture, it doesn't look as good as it did before, does it? When we know what is behind it. Is this the story, like what I explained, is this the story that we want? Then we want solar panels to be circular, produce fairly, and last for way longer. However, this story is a reality. So it is time for a disruption. We need to actually start building the solar panels that will be in the future today. Because if you remember what you were thinking about just a few minutes ago, the future is not that far away. The future is fastly approaching us. So we are Biosphere Solar, and we are working on a solar panel that is overcoming these problems, that is overcoming this problematic story. And how do we do that? Instead of gluing all the different layers together, we work with an edge sealing technique, which makes them disassemblable and repairable, because the components are separated. So that also means the lifetime of the product, the solar panel, is way longer, because also EVA degrades, which influences the performance of the solar panel. But of course, it's not only about performance. We try to work with sustainable and fair components as much as possible, and are also working on the aesthetics, because we believe people should be proud of their solar panels, right?
Yeah, and in line of rethinking routines, this is an interesting point, open source hardware. Because most of the people who start a startup in Delft are immediately told, great, patent your idea. Don't talk to anyone about it, keep it secret. Which is, it always sounded a bit weird to me, right? Like, okay, we are developing a technology that literally more than half of the world needs, and you're telling me that I'm the only person who should have access to developing and selling that technology? Of course not. So we are working with open hardware. Open hardware doesn't mean that you just freely give your technology away and anyone can do with it what they want. It means, first of all, that nobody can patent it anymore. And second of all, it means that whoever copies this technology and develops it further will also have to share their developments back. So you create, through an open hardware license, a legally binding open innovation community. Which we think is really the way forward when it comes to developing sustainable innovation.
So that was the what and the how. Now about the who. Biosphere Solar consists of a founding team of 4 people, and in total we are with 15. Most of us are still studying next to working at Biosphere, and we also work together with other students at universities where we are a case study for certain projects. Because this working together, this learning together is something we really value, hence open source. And because when we rethink our routines, we think about what is actually really important. And we believe impact first. We want the organization to not only serve the shareholders, but to serve the people and the planet. And for that, the team is very important. So we strive for equity, diversity, and inclusivity, because we want everybody to feel welcome to join and to contribute, but also to feel happy and appreciated. So we want not just a team, but an amazing team where we create together, where we learn together, where we build relationships, and then sometimes even friendships.
Yeah, and so those values are really, really core to us and really important to us. And that means that we shouldn't only speak them out, because when the team changes, maybe they have different values, and some of our most important values get lost. So we decided to lay them down in our very legal structure. So normally a company, like it was explained, is supposed to serve in the interest of its shareholders. What do shareholders want? Profit, continuity. This model, steward ownership, is a hack in which you can make the shareholders, which have all the power in your company, your stewards. So who are the stewards in our case? Well, the founding team. We're actually all in this room today, which is great. And so those stewards, as a growing organization, will be seated in a foundation. We call it the One Biosphere Foundation, with the goal to develop sustainable infrastructures needed for a safe anthropocene. And that foundation develops those infrastructures and then scales them up through what we call in the Netherlands BV, in English a limited liability company. So this is a company that can really grow. The company can also attract investors, but those investors will not be the most important stakeholder. Actually, those investors will be seated next to a group of other stakeholders and have to make decisions together so that we can ensure people, planet, and profit are respected, and also the company is always remaining with its mission, cannot be bought up by other companies. Now, Biosphere Solar is our first project, but also the benefit of this is that the foundation can become like a holding company that develops a bunch more sustainable infrastructures. But that is something for the far future. Maybe more important is to look at where are we right now. So we are currently, I have a laser, that's nice. We're currently prototyping, but not for long. We are actually very, very close to our minimum viable product, which won't be our best, like most sustainable envisioned solar panel, but it's a solar panel that we can produce today, put out in the field, that can be fully recycled, and where we can show as much transparency in the supply chain as possible. It's very important that you certify it, otherwise you're not allowed to sell it, and you also don't know for sure that it's safe. So that is going to be our main activity for the next year. We're talking to manufacturers right now because we don't have the capital to set up our own factory. So next year, we're going to manufacture it with a factory and then install it at our launching customers. If you're interested in becoming a launching customer, let me know. Those launching customers will form a sort of showcase. These will be people who present our technology to the world, show that it works, meaning that we can go to a next level of scale, which is our version 2, which will be like a full package, a solar that anyone can install. You can go up on the website, you select what kind of installation you want, an installer comes to your house and helps you to get a fully sustainable and hopefully very nice looking solar panel that you can be proud of. So not a solar panel that's like, oh yeah, I put it on my roof and I earned it back in 3 years, so that's pretty good. But like a solar panel that you really like, look at my solar panels, they look amazing. And I'm really happy about them, and I have this whole story that I can tell you about it. So if you're interested in that, or if you have ideas, then please come to us and help us. But of course, making a super sustainable solar panel at a small scale will not be very cheap. And that means that initially this will only be for the people who actually have the budget for it. But obviously we want to be a company with a global impact. And that means that you have to make your products available to a worldwide audience. And for that we have our version 3, which will be launched through a more innovative model, which also, again, Paul was very kind in explaining. How can you rethink business? How can you make sure, for example, that a customer doesn't pay anything upfront, but you put people together into a cooperative, forming a giant distributed power plant all over the world. And for this, we will develop a specific product which is lightweight and low cost. But that's for our future. First things first.
So for all those great plans, we need money. And where does it come from? Right now, it is coming from subsidies, accelerator programs, and grants. And soon we'll be opening up to investors who want to build this future with us. So if you want to know more about that, if you know someone who might be interested, you can go to biosphere.solar/invest. And if you want to contribute in any other way, if you are inspired, if you want to learn more, you can also take a look at biosphere.solar, or of course, just ask us about it. Thanks.
Thank you.
I must say I feel very much appreciated by being in the team of Biosphere. Thank you so much. I actually want to invite you to come back because we'll start the panel. So also for the other speakers, I think we gave you a bit of an introduction in how we can rethink our routines in business, education, starting your own company, all these things. So we first wanted to ask you to kind of respond to each other. So maybe your first question could be to Biosphere as someone who just graduated and someone who's still a student. What is the type of content you need in a course fully based on education? What are you missing right now? So,
what I'm missing right now, I think it is very important to know that there are things like open source, because maybe you have heard of it before, but it's not really that common knowledge, I would say. So I think more information about all the different ways you can make impact.
Yeah, I mean, I studied industrial ecology, so I feel like what do we need in terms of sustainability? I was pretty saturated. Also in terms of like freedom to operate, I loved that I could build my first prototypes as part of the industrial ecology program. So I actually would like to express gratitude more than desire. But if I would have to, yeah, I think the perspective that you gave, which is looking at systemic solutions rather than individual responsibility. It's part of the curriculum and it's explained, but not in this way. So I would like to bring that out in a more clear way and bring that back to our own lifestyles and our own career path.
Thanks. There may be a question for Paul. Do you have any tips for Biosphere, as you have been in the business for such a long time?
Well, actually, I like the, what is Judith, right? Yeah, what Judith asked for is some insights on open source business cases rather than own and patent and earn. Because there's a lot of examples of companies who developed open source standards and invited others to innovate on those platforms and add on. So if you're the starter of an open platform, you invite innovation, you're a source of innovation, and still by setting the standard and adapting the standard to the new innovations, you create other types of income, or even because you need some income, you need some. It's not giving away, like you said in the beginning. What was it, Stefan? Sorry, Siemen. Sorry. So, like Siemen said, it's not about giving away your content, but by learning and experiencing in your studies how you can make money with open source and how's the rules of the game in business. Because you have to, make money in some sort, and how can you apply these rules or new rules of new games and set a standard in that? So I, advise you to continue on that way.
Any one of you have any questions for the audience, like what they thought of the presentations, or do you want to ask students something? Like, is there a way? There's a lot of discussion at the moment on people being an activist in different ways. Maybe also can ask. But, are there any questions for you, to the audience?
Question not, but I promised Andrea not to agree with her, and actually I didn't agree with her, of course. So she sort of created two ends of a spectrum, like individual action and systemic action that need to be changed. Whereas I tend to try to believe that you can live in both worlds. So you can take individual actions and feel responsible and consume less or consume better, and still be aware that there is a bigger system out there that's also, but then working in a company or in a government or an NGO, wherever you're going to work, you can be part of the change of both the system and your own behavior. So don't be skeptical about what your impact is. Every small step is one step in the right direction, but also as an individual in an organization, don't wait for the bosses to change the system, but you can change the system from within. Not by demonstrating or by trying to shake all the trees, but by asking the right questions, being curious, being skeptical in times. So don't underestimate your own power, and don't underestimate your the power of true intentions.
I agree with you, and also really that you were saying like it's so systemic. So I think we should try ourselves maybe to be our best selves, maybe not with too much pressure, but also to realize that it is not only us who make the change, and like we saw the carbon footprint coming from BP, that we realize that is happening.
But then again, BP didn't invent carbon footprint in '72 in the World 3 model. It was already invented from the World Economic Forum, and then BP applied it and used it in their own advantage and changed it a little.
Well, the environmental footprint was predated that, but the carbon footprint specifically, I'm not sure that.
Yeah, but and even if, so you have to be aware that companies reframe things for their best, for their own personal intentions. But anyway, I should be closing up for.
We have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the very diverse palette of perspectives. I like to think that it's an and solution, like you said. I think it is with a lot of environmental decision making. I'm curious, now that we're kind of in a university environment anyway, and we have some professors here, we have some entrepreneurs, what do you think the role should be of universities? Should it be more leaning towards educating in systemic ways, or should individual activism also be promoted? I'm also asking this from the slight frustration I sometimes have with the very agnostic stance of the TU Delft. Yeah, maybe a question for the professor.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if I have a very well thought out answer to this. I mean, my talk is mainly about how the university, in my view, should position itself differently with regards to education specifically, right? Its mandate for educating future engineers, and that it's headed in some good directions, but that should include much more sort of, many more of like the ethical and the social dimensions of these problems, and helping engineers understand those and feel comfortable in thinking about them. I also think that as a technical university, it does take this very agnostic stance, and that compared to other universities where there are more humanities students who are already interested in more political issues, you have that, there's just more activism as a part of the student body. To me, like, that's not something the university itself can do, right? Like, that should be coming from students and student interests. And I think there are lots of ways that the TU Delft could be more supportive of that, or help generate that. That's my view as a person who thinks that, these kind of forms of activism are crucial to bringing attention to problems and also helping people think about them in different ways, and not only from an individual perspective. I hope that things like this event, and these kinds of growing groups like the GreenTU can bring more students together to do this kind of stuff and have more of a grassroots kind of presence. I don't think it's the universities, that has to be coming from up. There's lots more that the university should do top down, for sure. But that, I don't see that, and in political ways as well, yes.
Any response from the audience?
Yes, thanks. Tom here. Yesterday I was at an event called End Fossil, which called for universities to end fossil subsidies and relations with, for example, Shell. So you mentioned in your talk we should invest more in, we should do more climate-related studies and more ethical studies. But this takes me back to my bachelor's course, in which I had an ethical course. It was this famous example of Werner von Braun, who worked for the Nazis and said, once the rockets go up, who cares where they go down? That's not my department. But TU Delft still teaches us how to make rockets, and they still teach us how to extract oil from the world. So they do have these ethical courses. Then it goes back to, prior to starting university, students care a lot more about the environment or more about social causes and social welfare. But after they're done, not so much. Why do you think that is? Because I think maybe people are too worried about deadlines and stress and exams and burnout. And a friend of mine told me, maybe I'll go work for Shell because I'm 70,000 euros in student debt. So who cares about the environment? I just want to get rid of that debt. So I think my question is, do you think the university also has a role in, you mentioned in doing good, but should we also stop evil, stop bad? So should we kick out fossil fuel companies? And should we also stop giving courses about how to extract oil, or stop giving courses with Shell?
I don't have a good answer to some parts of that question. Do I think that the university should take more of a stance in doing, not just not doing bad, but doing good? Yes. Yeah, this is a super complicated topic. Philosophy asks us to ask questions and to create critical, or help create students who can make these decisions, are in a position to decide for themselves what kind of world they want to help build, what kind of engineer they want to become. This is a personal view. It's not my role as a ethics teacher to tell students that they should not, there's no place for working for Shell or any, those are things that I want to help students be able to think about and reflect on for themselves. There may be good reasons for working for Shell if you have a ton of student debt. Or, some people believe, and I don't know about this, but some people believe you can do good work from the inside. And maybe there are places where that's true, maybe there are places where that's not true. I don't feel like I'm qualified to make that kind of claim. But I think it's the role of the university. I think Delft should do more to get students to be critical of these, of the shells of the world, and also to reflect on the way in which TU Delft historically has been positioned with regard to, and in a continuing way, with regard to fossil energy, exploitation around the world, etc. That's something that we have to own, and we don't really, that's not included in our teaching. That's not what students, not what we talk about. That needs to, I think that's part of it. But my personal view, should we stop teaching specific topics? No, I guess I would love it if we didn't have to, if there was no interest, if the students wanted instead to do exactly this kind of project, to make circular solar panels, rather than going and working in fossil development when we know we can't actually do any more extraction without major bad consequences.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. I actually don't really agree, and I'm surprised that you say this, because for me, systemic solutions are all about sort of limiting the options, and that sounds in a way very bad, but there's this interesting story about my grandma who was always recycling green waste, and she did a very careful job at putting all her green waste into one bin and all her other plastic in another and paper in another, which was amazing, and then she always put the green waste in the green bin, but inside a plastic bag. And she just didn't, it didn't come to her mind that that was not how you're supposed to do that. I feel like if we don't, we have this very neoliberal view of, people vote with their choices and with their money, and students will not take, should just not take this course, and people should just not buy the apples with the plastic bag. But for me, it's no, in the first place, we shouldn't give them things that can destroy the planet, and that should be forbidden, and that would be a real systemic solution, because we have the alternatives, they are out there, and we also forbid asbestos, for example, and so it's not that evil to forbid things that are incredibly polluting and damaging. So yeah, I don't agree that we should say all out, okay, people should just make better choices, and if they don't, well, what can we do?
And actually, so there's a responsibility in university in teaching things. Well, one thing for sure is you're not only taught here how to mine minerals, but also how to reuse and extract them. And the urban mining company regaining metals from waste incineration was born here in Delft by the professor from the mining faculty. So having the technology gives you opportunities to change, to use the technology for changes. So that's the first thing. So it's not only bad technology. You can have rocket technology, you can build a bomb with it, or you can fly to Mars. Same technology. So that's the first thing. Secondly, I think you as an individual have the responsibility to try to figure out who you want to be and who you want to become. So what's your purpose in life? Where do you want to end up? And what's defining your action? What's going to be your next action? And part of that is not to put pressure on you, but just to look at as an interesting adventure that you're entering by building up knowledge, but also by asking questions and being asked questions and being cynical or critical and having fun at the same time to try and find out what's your way, what you want to do. And if you want to earn the 70,000 euros, you can do that with Shell, and you can do it with Shell designing heat exchange systems for water or groundwater systems with the same technology that you use for pumping up oil. And part of it, you need some basis of technology, of knowledge, to build also the new innovation. And third and final thing is, now what's the third and final thing? I forgot the third and final thing.
We have a response from the audience.
Yeah, thanks. Some of the things you say I can kind of agree with. There are some things that I'm super strongly opposed. And I think I'm going to mention those. They're the interesting ones. You mentioned the way that you're speaking kind of suggests that the individual has a lot of choice and should have a lot of choice. And it's up to them to figure out what they want to do. But this is the exact type of thinking that has led us to where we are today, which is with an economy that is in shambles and with a climate that is going haywire and with companies that have so much power that they seem indestructible. And I think we need to realize that we are a product of our environment. And Tim actually talked about it really well with me a couple days ago and said that there is a lot of power and ownership that comes with saying, okay, actually, I am a result of everything that has come before me and all those things that are around me. And so it's really important that that environment is conducive to having a better world. And if you say it's your path and it's your responsibility to choose the way you want to go, then that gives so much free will, but we don't have so much energy to spend on making the right decisions. And I think having that mentality is just going to keep us in this loop of placing blame on the individual because they're making choices that are bad for the environment, but actually they're just a product of the environment they're in. So yeah, that's my rant.
Thank you for bringing back on point 3. This is without being naive, because yeah, I do believe you have individual choice to some point, and on the other hand, you are working in a system. So system uses money, and the money as a system has rules, and these rules limit our freedom of action. So you should not be too naive, and part of the responsibility of university is teaching you those systems and the world you're entering in a company. And that's why I think, again, Judith's question about new business case, open source business case versus old business cases, it helps you understanding those worlds and those systems that are out there. And whether you're going to work in a company or in a government, you're part of creating those systems or walking in the frames of those systems. So without being naive, but also not just giving up and just accepting everything around you.
Okay, I think...
Can I just ask
one question?
Yeah, I'm just curious if... I am really curious about this idea. Can I just have a sense of, like, who... I would... Yeah. Just the show of hands here. Like, are there... Like, who would support TU Delft, like, kind of closing down... Not in terms of divestment from companies, but closing down sort of areas of research or education, for instance, related to fossil development and extraction. Like, is that, I'm really curious what your views on that are.
Recruiting events as well.
Sorry?
Recruiting events as well.
Recruiting event. Okay. Right. Yeah, okay, that's so interesting. I mean, this is like what we should talk about in an environmental ethics class, like this kind of question, like, should the technical university be even teaching these topics any longer? I love it, thank you. All right.
I think we can discuss this over a cup of coffee as well. I think we have one last question, and then we're going to round up. So one answer, and then...
Hey, so I actually have a lot of stuff to say. So first, you guys might want to look into a French organization that's called Time for the Planet. And how it works is that you know about them?
Yeah, we're fine.
Oh, perfect. Okay, then I don't have to really explain that. So another thing I want to talk about, so I'm not a student. I haven't been a student in the last 15 years. I used to work in video games, actually. And what I did back then, so I used to live in Canada, and we have these retirement funds that are given by the company you work in. And the thing is, once I actually looked into what kind of portfolio were available for us to invest our retirement, basically our retirement money that the company is giving us. And when I looked into that, I realized there was a lot of GAFAM, fossil fuels, gold mines, like really shitty stuff that I really didn't want to invest in as a person. So I actually told the CEO about that. And so we wanted to change things to at least make more portfolio available, but it's actually, it didn't happen because COVID, because it's complicated and blah, blah, blah. And the thing is, there's an aspect to that, that you have green funds where you actually invest in what they call the best students in their fields. So basically you're gonna have the worst bad companies that are going to get funded. Well, you're going to put, you're going to invest, you're going to buy shares as a person. And the whole idea is what someone was telling earlier is that the philosophy behind that I don't necessarily agree with it, is that you want to have more voices from the inside to change the politics of the company. But you're still, getting interest from money from fossil fuels, for instance, if you're funding a fossil fuel company, right? So all this to say that, I was really frustrated with the first part of your presentation at first, until you really said that, the problem lies into the fact that we see ourselves are consumers mostly, and we're not consumers, we're citizens. We're investors as well, because I think it's Jeremy Rifkin that was saying that the biggest amount of money of investment you can find right now is actually the retirement funds. It's like billions of dollars that are invested in like the wrong stuff, basically, and that could be used to actually fund a Green Deal. And so there's this, that people really tend to overlook, like, where is their money? What bank is their money in? And also, we're also employees or entrepreneurs. So I actually left video games to start a zero-waste shop here in Delft. That's called Local Loop, if you guys want to look it up. I have some flyers. Yeah, I might as well advertise. But yeah, so we're also entrepreneurs and employees, so we are the companies, we are the shareholders, we are the citizens, and we are the consumers, but the consumers shouldn't be, okay, I have a zero waste, so whatever. But yeah, I agree that it shouldn't be the fundamental point, and so we are also the government. And I'm really very frustrated by this whole debate about, like, okay, who is responsible for what, basically? Are the government responsible? Are the companies responsible? Are the people responsible? Are the consumers? And it's just really frustrating because we all need to do our best, period. Like, there's no way around it, and that's it. Sorry, it was not actually a question.
If it's okay with you all, we are going to round up here. Thank you so much. We have some seasonal flowers for you, actually for the speakers. So I hope they enlighten a bit this whole panel. And thank you so much for all your work. So at the entrance, you've all been given your name tag and some colors. I'm sure that you probably forgot which workshop you are in. The people who will do the impact workshop will stay here And the people who will go to the refill market, please join me outside. We will give you a short introduction on the workshop, and then there will be coffee and tea. Thank you.